I live in the South, so the woods were something I grew up with. I was always an outdoorsman and would often go climbing and exploring in the forests around where I lived. Sometimes I would go out to camp, chopping small trees, making fires, and practicing with my knives and machetes. I was never really scared of anything, to be honest, even at a young age. I always carried at least a fixed blade knife with me on my adventures and felt like I could take on anything that came my way. As I grew older, I didn't do this kind of thing as much, but I would go hiking quite often. Anyway, a couple of weeks ago on a Sunday, May 3rd, I decided I would go on an afternoon hike just to enjoy being outside. I still enjoyed the woods as much as I had when I was a kid. Now I think I actually appreciate it more. My senses are calibrated a lot better these days, so I am able to take in all the scenery and nature, which just feels peaceful. This Sunday seemed just like any other, and I got into my car to drive to my hiking spot. I'm not a fan of going on official hiking trails because the linear course and other people seem to dilute the wild. My spot is pretty out of the way, about an hour from my home, and no one else would have any reason to go there. It isn't marked at all. No signs, no fences, no footprints, nothing. It is just endless woods for miles and miles. I parked my car a pretty good distance from where I always entered, just in case anyone came by, although the dirt road was always completely deserted. Now that I think about it, I have never seen or even heard of a car or other people over there. I set off on my walk through the woods, geared with my trail running shoes, a hat, and my 6-inch engraved knife in its sheath on my belt. I strolled along my normal route to start off with an expanse of lush green in all directions. I covered about 2 miles of flat ground, climbed a 20-foot boulder wall, and traversed across a small creek. I was just taking in everything around me. The cool breath of a breeze on my back, the sound of the flowing water filling my ears, and scanning the diverse landscape for any wildlife. I continued on my favorite path. It wasn't really a path, but I knew the woods pretty well at this point. Then I got to an area where I realized I had never gone off to the left. I'm not sure why I never went that way because I had pretty much explored all other directions in the vicinity. Not taking too much time to think about it, I headed left into the uncharted horizon. After a few more miles in this new direction, I started to get a strange feeling. It was an eerie kind of feeling, like something was off. I realized I hadn't seen any animals this way. No birds flying above, no squirrels shuffling on tree branches, not even any bugs making noises. Nothing. I brushed it off and continued my trek. I stopped here and there to examine different things, like strange markings on some of the trees, but there was nothing too exciting over here. I noticed the sun was starting to descend, and the darkness was creeping in. I had completely lost track of time exploring this new place. I left my home to go on my hike a little after noon, so I had to have been out there for 5 or 6 hours. I remember thinking how strange it was that the moon was already fairly high so early in the day. Time seems to go by in a different manner when I'm out in the woods. I don't know why that is. I decided it was time to head back. I would have to hurry because it would be dark soon. I turned and set off in the direction I had come from. At least I thought I was. The woods were a lot denser in this section than the others I had explored in the opposite direction, so it was a lot harder to keep track of where I was. I soon realized I was kind of lost. I must have gotten turned around somewhere. Whenever I am in the woods, even an area I know well, I always leave a trail of some kind to guide me back. Every 30 feet or so I would bend a branch or occasionally make an X on a tree with my knife so it was clear I had been there. I kept trying to trace my steps, but I couldn't find any broken branches and I was getting a bit frustrated. I never made mistakes like this, so what the hell was going on? Just then I saw an X marked on a tree. There we go. No need to get worked up after all. I walked further looking for more signs. Then I saw another X, then another, and another. All right, I definitely didn't carve that many trees and there were still no broken branches at all. I was getting a little worried at this point. I continued on, hoping to see some form of familiarity, but I just kept seeing X markings. They were on almost every tree at this point. Now I know I had never been this far onto this side before, so these markings couldn't have been from me on previous visits. Plus, I would never be so foolish to make that many markings because it would just create confusion. I went to examine one of the markings and quickly realized that they were wider than my knife would cut. and a lot deeper. That's when the feeling hit me again. That eerie sense when you know something is wrong. That feeling that you're not alone. That feeling that you're being watched. Now, like I said, I have always been pretty fearless, but I'm not stupid. There are certain situations that even a knife and good instincts can't get you out of. Still, I was determined not to show fear. Maybe if I showed whoever was fucking with me that I wasn't going to take any shit, that they would show themselves or leave. The dark was getting thicker by the minute. I needed to get the fuck out of here now. I started walking slowly in what I thought was the right direction, listening for anything abnormal. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. At one point, I finally thought I was just being paranoid and making shit up. Then I started to hear noises, all while the consuming darkness swept over the forest. The sounds started off like small sticks breaking, then scratching of tree bark, then leaves rustling violently, then branches being torn off trees. I looked in every direction, but it was getting harder and harder to see with night looking down fast and my eyes unadjusted. My hand gripped the hilt of my knife tight, and I started moving at a faster pace. I was getting really freaked out. The next sound came much louder than all the rest. It sounded closer. I turned to where it was coming from. That's when I saw him. I could barely make out a dark figure in the distance. The moonlight was beaming down. It was one of the brightest moons I have ever seen. It still provided an illumination through the thick canopy of trees overhead. This guy looked big, like really big. There was no way I could take a guy that big normally. With a knife, I maybe stood a chance. That is, if he wasn't armed with anything. I could see him start walking in my direction, getting closer and closer. Then I noticed that he walked in a very strange way, and I couldn't see any outline of clothing. He was covered in something. As he moved closer, I realized just how big it was. There is no way a man can be that big. There aren't any big games in the area where I live. The biggest things we have are deer and coyotes. This thing looked like the size of a bear, but I knew that was impossible. Bears didn't live anywhere near here, like not even in this state. I started walking backwards, drawing my knife slowly, not wanting to take my eyes off of this thing. Just as I pulled my knife fully from the sheath, it started running full speed, on all fours. I have never run so fast in my entire life. Within seconds, my hat was off my head, falling behind me carelessly. My legs were in overdrive as I sprinted in the opposite direction of whatever animal was chasing me. I wasn't going to stop. There is no fucking way I'm going to stop, I told myself. I could hear it behind me, gaining on me with tremendous speed. I was too terrified to look over my shoulder, but I could feel it right on my heels. I started weaving through the trees, still going at full speed. This seemed to throw it off a little, like it didn't expect a good old-fashioned serpentine pattern. I felt it get a little further behind me and continued to dodge and weave through the branches and trees. The sound of branches snapping with ease was the only audible noise in my mind. I still thought I might be able to lose it. That was until I reached a clearing where the small creek stretched through the woods. Open area. Fuck. I at least knew where I was now. I tore through the last of the trees and was making my way to the creek. The creek was pretty wide here, but there were some rocks dividing the water into different streams. I leapt to one rock and then to another. It was too dark to see clearly, and I was moving so fast that I didn't have time to check my surroundings appropriately. As my foot hit the second rock, I felt it slide out from under me. It felt like I was falling in slow motion, and I could clearly hear the beast right behind me. I caught myself with my free arm, but still went face first into the water. Without a second's hesitation, I hurled myself back up and jumped out of the creek, all in one fluid motion. I honestly wasn't sure I was going to make it at this point. I could hear intense grunts and growls right on my ass as I tried to start running again. Suddenly, I couldn't go forward. Something pulled me back by my ankle. I had almost forgotten the knife clutched like a dagger in my right hand. It was like an extension of my body at this point. I spun on pure instinct as the immense force pulled me back and tried to slash with my blade. I must have hit because my knife didn't come back as I swung my body in the other direction when the grip on my ankle released. Then I heard the most terrifying cry, sounding like nothing I had ever heard before. It cracked through the silence of the forest, creating a void of pure terror. I said I ran faster than I ever had before, but that is not true. At this moment, I ran faster than humanly possible. I guess it was that fight or flight response people always talk about. I didn't look back once as the foul cries filled the air. I just ran. After what seemed like hours, I finally saw the break in the tree line where the dirt road was. I sprinted on fumes to my car, grabbed the keys from the back tire, and took off. As I drove off, I could still hear cries and howls in the distance, but nothing else. When I twisted my body to strike at the creature, I got a glimpse of it fully. It was not a fucking bear. It was not a fucking coyote. I don't know what the fuck it was. I had never seen eyes like that. I had never seen teeth like that. The image pulsed through my mind all the way home. But I made it. I made it out alive. I survived. When I got home, I took some time to compose myself. Sure, I was safe. I needed a hot shower to clean off and soothe my terrified mind. It wasn't until I got out of the shower that I noticed the long, deep gash on the back of my calf. Maybe I nicked it on something as I was running. The adrenaline had kept the pain at bay, I guess. I quickly cleaned it and bandaged it. I took some sleeping pills that night because I knew there was no way I was going to fall asleep on my own. The most bizarre thing is that when I woke up the next day and removed my bandage, there was no wound. It was a completely healed scar. Just a faint line of the large cut I had seen the night before. I still don't understand how that is possible. Ever since that night, I've felt strange. I haven't felt like myself, and it gets worse every day. It doesn't feel like a sickness. Hell, I feel stronger than ever. It just feels like I'm not fully in control. All I know is that I can never go back to that spot. I still feel like I hear that howl every night in my dreams, but it has to be just a dream, right?